Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, European Union member states have met to discuss an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine and draw up plans to take on greater responsibilities for the continent's defense. The Houthi group says its ballistic missile attack on southern Tel Aviv aims to show its support of the Palestinian people. And the US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to dismantle the Federal Department of Education. First in Europe, European Union member states, excluding Hungary, have agreed to support a proposal for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the leaders via video link for their support. These countries also held informal discussions, drawing up plans to take on greater responsibilities for the continent's defense from the United States. The discussions are an attempt to avoid the chaos of a potential unilateral US withdrawal from NATO. Stuart Smith has more from Brussels.
A program called reaffirm Europe frees up around $160 billion for defense, but crucially only for weapons and equipment produced in Europe and other select countries like Ukraine. It excludes in its current form the American and British defense industries, something London hopes to change. The EU Council says this will help boost competitiveness as well as European security, and it's a win for the French, German and Italian defense industries which compete with the UK for business. The money from this loan can be spent on what the EU considers its most pressing deficiencies, from drones and anti-drone systems to air and missile defence, areas which Ukraine believes it can significantly contribute. But EU leaders at the summit have disagreed on what exactly the eligibility criteria should be when it comes to what can be bought, with some countries wanting it to be linked strictly to defence, while others saying looser criteria should be acceptable, like improving cybersecurity. On Thursday, the EU disbursed an additional $1 billion to Ukraine, money that comes from the profits of frozen Russian assets, as it claims the burden of rebuilding Ukraine should be shouldered by those responsible for its destruction. Separately, leaders discussed the Middle East, deploring a breakdown of the ceasefire in Gaza and the refusal of Hamas to hand over remaining hostages. They urged Syria's transitional authorities to ensure the protection of civilians, and leaders of countries that rely on the euro currency say they want to do more to use the private savings of Eurozone citizens in European investments as one way to boost growth in European businesses.
That was Stuart Smith on the latest EU commitments to Ukraine. Moving on to the Middle East. Yemen's Houthi group has claimed responsibility for a ballistic missile attack on southern Tel Aviv. A Houthi military spokesperson says the operation was in support of the Palestinian people. This follows a previous attack the group aimed at the Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv. The Israeli military says it intercepted 2 missiles launched from Yemen on Thursday. Meanwhile, media reports say the US military launched airstrikes on Yemen's Red Sea port city of Hodeidah and the northern Sada province on Thursday evening. Ahab Al-Fandi has more details.
U.S. warplanes carried out airstrikes on a residential area in the Thawra district, causing widespread destruction and leaving several people dead. CGTN's camera was at the bombing site in Sana'a, capturing the scenes of destruction and subsequent fires.
While we're having dinner, U.S. warplanes launched 2 airstrikes on residential neighborhoods, causing casualties, including around 9 civilians. These locations have no connection to military sites. They are purely civilian residential areas.
The U.S. airstrikes were not limited to Sana'a. They also targeted the provinces of Sada, Al-Jawf, Al-Bayda, and Hodeidah, which are under the control of Ansar Allah, widely known as the Houthis. More than 10 airstrikes were carried out. President Donald Trump says they are targeting sites linked to the Ansar Allah group. The United States says these strikes aim to stop Ansar Allah from attacking U.S. and Israeli ships in the Red Sea. But Ansar Allah insists the attacks will not stop their operations. They say the only way to end the attacks is to stop the Israeli war in Gaza and lift the blockade.
As airstrikes continue and tensions rise, the situation here on the ground remains uncertain, and civilians across the country that are paying the ultimate price. In Sana'a, residents are waking up to devastation surrounded by rubble and destruction following a night of bombardment.
That was Al-Fandi reporting. Meanwhile, Israel's military has resumed bombing Gaza and expanded ground operations. The Gazan Health Ministry says at least 91 Palestinians have died, with dozens wounded. The armed wing of Hamas says it fired rockets at Tel Aviv in response to Israel's killing of civilians. Rami Amagari reports from Gaza City.
The story is the continuation of Israeli airstrikes on various parts of the Gaza Strip, including the northern part, the central Gaza Strip, the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. It has been reported that 90 Palestinians have been killed. 17 of them have been killed in a strike in the Beit Lahia town, where the Israeli army decided to start a ground operation, the first such announcement since Israel renewed its war against Gaza about 3 days ago. That is the situation right now, with the traffic is being blocked by the Israeli army, as they have the Israeli army has retaken the Netzarim corridor, which was running during the truce deal, but now it is being controlled by the Israeli army, and the traffic is very blocked from the south to the north, and from north to the south it is okay on the road, the coastal road, as stated by the Israeli army statement. That is the situation for the time being. More Israeli airstrikes, more Israeli announcements that the Israeli army will continue its operations against the Gaza Strip. For the first time, the Islamist Hamas party announces it has fired a small barrage of rockets into the Tel Aviv town in Israel. This is the first time that Hamas announces this and reacts to the current wave of violence with the rocket fire.
That was Rami Amagari in Gaza. Turning to East Asia, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is scheduled to attend the 11th China, Japan, South Korea trilateral foreign ministers meeting in Tokyo on Saturday. During his visit to Japan, Wang Yi will also co-chair a high-level economic dialogue with his Japanese counterpart. Torrance Tarashima has more from Tokyo.
A trilateral foreign ministers meeting between China, Japan and South Korea is scheduled to be held on Saturday in Tokyo. It's the first meeting between the foreign ministers since talks were last held in Busan, South Korea in November 2023. Japanese Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya is set to host the meeting and will be joined by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tak-yeol. The three are expected to discuss both regional and international issues. The meeting is being held amid growing concerns over the global economy and the subsequent impact of US President Donald Trump's tariffs. The three neighbors are hoping to discuss how they can offset some of the global economic challenges as they face tariff threats on aluminum, steel, cars and chips. The three countries are also looking to promote future-oriented cooperation. Discussions on a possible trilateral summit in the near future is set to be on the table. A high-level economic dialogue that will gather relevant ministers from Japan and China is also scheduled to be held for the first time in 6 years.
That was Torrance Tarashima in Tokyo. In North America, U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to dismantle the Federal Department of Education. The order is designed to leave school policies almost entirely in the hands of states and local boards. Jim Spellman reports.
President Trump has signed an executive order that aims to dismantle the Department of Education. This has long been a goal of Trump and some conservative activists who claim public schools in the U.S. are too focused on so-called woke cultural issues. They want states to have more control over schools, arguing a state that, like, say, New Jersey in the East, is far different from a rural state like Montana in the West, and that educational priorities should reflect those differences. Ultimately, Trump says he wants to see the Department of Education completely eliminated, but this executive order doesn't go that far. Executive order comes as the Department of Education has seen widespread budget cuts and mass layoffs. Many of those laid off workers reject the idea that the DOE is pushing culture war issues.
One thing that grinds my gears is just hearing that, we're giving education back to the states. We never had it. And we are not in your classrooms, as Sharia stated, telling teachers what to teach, how to teach it, what to do. We are here to make sure that children have an equal opportunity to educational outcomes and that they can be the best that they can be.
Under the Trump plan, many of the duties now overseen by the Department of Education that can't be sent to states would be handled by other parts of the federal government. Some duties, like student loan repayments for college students, will remain at DOE, at least for now.
That's Jim Spellman reporting. And finally, Friday, March 21st, is the International Day of Forests. First set up in 2012 by the United Nations General Assembly, it aims to celebrate and raise awareness of the importance of all types of forests. Woodlands are important pillars of global food security and nutrition, and the livelihoods of millions of families. They also play a key role in agriculture by hosting pollinators and acting in soil enrichment, climate regulation, and biodiversity conservation. According to the UN, wooded watersheds are sources of fresh water to more than 85% of the world's major cities. In crisis situations, forests become an economic and a food lifeline, providing up to 20% of family income in rural areas while guaranteeing healthy diets. But we are losing our trees at an accelerated pace, with 10 million hectares lost annually to deforestation and around 70 million hectares devoured by fires. Over the years, China has been taking extra special care of its woodlands. It has also been planting more trees than any other nation on the planet. Xia Chen explains the country's efforts on forest conservancy.
Forests are crucial for our planet and play an important role in our daily lives. They cover approximately 1/3 of the Earth's land area. Well, these ecosystems are home to some 80% of the world's terrestrial biodiversity. They are a natural defense against climate change, removing the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide and generating oxygen. And forests also play a crucial role in the maintenance of ecological elements such as the nitrogen cycle, precipitation, and soil health. At the COP26 Climate Summit in 2021, more than 100 countries, meaning 85% of the world's forests, pledged to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. China has made remarkable strides in afforestation and ecological restoration, especially in recent years, reinforcing its commitment to green development and environmental sustainability. In 2024, China planted 4.45 million hectares of trees, raising the country's forest coverage to over 25%, with the total forest stock volume exceeding 20 billion cubic meters. China has cumulatively afforested over 773 million hectares, making it the country with the largest hike and green coverage globally. This year's theme of the International Day of Forests is Forests and Foods. More than 5 billion people around the world use forest and non-timber forest products for food, medicine, and livelihoods. Forests and trees are a rich source of nuts, fruits, seeds, roots, tubers, leaves, mushrooms, honey, wild meat, and insects, providing essential nutrients for both people and animals. Over 2 billion people rely on wood and other traditional fuels supplied by forests for cooking. Even fossil fuels were formed from the dead remains of trees. Forests are also crucial for agriculture. They help keep the soil healthy, retaining water, offering food and shade for livestock, regulating temperatures, and acting as natural barriers against the wind for crops. With China's concept that lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets, the country has been enhancing its forest food production capacity. Official data show the country's annual forest food production has surpassed 200 million metric tons. That's about 140 kilograms for every individual in the country. Forest food products include edible oils, red dates, pine nuts, and specialty products such as mushrooms and ginseng. China has the development of forest food has ecological, economic, and social benefits, and is an important measure to build a diversified food supply system and ensure national food security there.
That was Xia Chen on China's greening efforts over the years. Now, recapping the headlines before we go, European member states have met to discuss an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine and draw up plans to take on greater responsibilities for the continent's defense. Yemen's Houthi group says its ballistic missile attack on southern Tel Aviv aims to show its support of the Palestinian people. And US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to dismantle the Federal Department of Education. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.